Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Wednesday Palaver. Today, the discussion is going to be interesting, it's going to be exciting, and perhaps a little hot. Today, we're going to be looking at attacks on media personnel and what some have described as the culture of silence. And we're going to look at the full implications of the attacks on journalists, the culture of silence, on our development efforts, and whether or not indeed it fits into the promotion of constitutionalism and so on. And indeed, it is my privilege to introduce a very articulate personality who has been with us a couple of times. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Mensah Thompson of ASEPA, who has been with us a couple of times. And today he's going to be our lead discussant. The program is going to be like this. He's going to give us about 20 minutes of introduction to the topic. And then after that, we're going to go to our social book platforms, WhatsApp, Facebook, and other platforms to take your comments and your questions. And then we'll come to the studio and listen to our studio audience, taking questions and comments. And then we will go back to our friend and lead discussant to give him the opportunity to answer some of the questions and to comment on some of the comments and so on. And then we shall go back to the studio audience and then take the closing remarks. So this is what we intend to do today, and it is my pleasure to welcome to the microphone Mr. Mensah Thompson.
Thank you very much, Uncle Kwesi. Forgive me, I have a little malaria, so I think my voice will come as we go along. This is a very important topic, and I don't think that I'm too experienced to discuss it. I'm only here to share the little knowledge that I have. People like Uncle Kwesi have been in this business for a while. They've come a long way. They've seen it through the trenches, and I will only tap into some of the things that they have experienced. For us to understand what is happening in the country today, as far as attacks on the media is concerned, we would have to go back a bit into, not so far, into the pre-2016 era, where a presidential candidate emerged, I think 2007, where a presidential candidate emerged to lead the NPP political party. From that time, a lot of things changed in our body politics. Unfortunately, it's either we did not pay attention to it, or we were too consumed by the political euphoria, and so we did not see what we were getting ourselves into. Somebody who had been touted as a human rights lawyer took over the affairs of the NPP. And since he took over from the party, it was violence after violence, attacks on party people, on individuals. The political tension in the country went so high. If you experience the 2008 elections, the 2018 and 2012 elections, you would wonder what was going on in this country, and wonder whether that was the first time Ghana was having a major elections. And all these things was happening because of one man. One man who we have touted as a human rights lawyer, as a freedom fighter, and somebody who had come in to save, our democracy. Some way, somehow, some element or collaborators in the media space assisted this character, facilitated his exploit, concealed some of his actions, or whitewashed some of his actions even when they are so glaring. And in the eyes of this section of the media, they saw no evil with this man. They had no evil. It was all about good news. It was all about his human rights exploits. By some miraculous means, this man ended up becoming president of this country at the end of the 2016 elections. And since 2017 till date, what we have been served with is a cocktail of attacks, an abuse of fundamental human rights, and an aggravation of what we witnessed prior to 2016. Today we are here, about 27 years after the Fourth Republic, when people like Uncle Kwesi Pratt has fought so much to ensure that there is independence of the press, that there is freedoms of the media. We are here again to relaunch the same fight that our forebears have fought, and by now we should have been a more mature democracy. So how did we get here? How did we get here? How come that after all these successes, that Ghana became a shining star on the continent? Our human rights indices, our press freedom rankings and everything was top-notch. It was so enviable on the continent. How come today we're having this conversation? And I say we're having this conversation because of one man. Because of President Akufo-Addo, who has preached so much virtue in his long political career, only to ascend to the high seat of government and practice vice. Before 2016, there was a general uproar in the country, from civil societies, from the media, from trade unionists, the Workers' Front, and what have you. Everybody was complaining. When things go wrong in the country, when taxes were increased, when fuel prices goes up, everybody was up in arms, and everybody was at liberty to criticize the government of the day. Today, there's huge corruption in the country, and people are not speaking up. There's huge corruption there's so much distress in the country, so much suffering, and still people are failing to speak up. The very people who led these campaigns are now quiet and silent in their holes, have not seen what is happening in the country today. When we say culture of silence, We are not saying that the country is in total silence, no. When we say culture of silence, what we are referring to is two regimes of government being subjected to two different regimes of accountability. So in 2016, the government had borrowed 76 billion, has built hospitals, have done a couple of infrastructure, and people came out and complained bitterly about the government's penchant for borrowing. From 2017 to 2020, another government has borrowed 122 billion. Yet still some section of the public see nothing wrong with it. It's fine that this government has borrowed 122 billion, but it was wrong for another government to have borrowed 76 billion. In 2016, we saw corruption, a few scandals here and there, and the people were up in arms. Some people were arrested, others were made to refund money, some investigations happened, and we were not satisfied. Between 2017 to 2020, worse has happened. Not a single investigation, not a single arrest, not a single prosecution, nothing. Yet still we are in the country and we are totally quiet. And so when we say culture of silence, this is exactly what we mean by the culture of silence. Subjecting two government to different levels of accountability. The effect of some of these things is that it creates what we call abuse of power, because now some people are beginning to feel invincible in this country because we have let them. They feel invincible, they feel untouchable, and they feel that they owe no accountability to anybody, and that is because we have let them. In 2019, two modern Ghana journalists were arrested. The officers were raided, they were abducted by national security, taken to the National Security Office, and they were tortured and abused. Prior to that, there have been several issues of people who have exposed corruption and were facing dangers to their lives. Prior to that, another investigative journalist had been killed, Mr. Ahmed Swale. Mr. Manasseh Azuri also did another investigation, and he had to flee the country for safety. I could go on and on and on. Several examples of continuous attack on the media. Not just the media, we in the civil society fraternity have also not been left. We received our own forms of attack, threats, and what have you. Now, one of the key ingredients that separate a democracy from a dictatorial regime is freedom of the press, is free press. Anytime this key ingredient is missing out of any democratic dispensation, what you have is not a democracy anymore. And so the question I ask is President Akufo-Addo really a Democrat? You see? Have we been sold a counterfeit? Have we been sold something else? Because in the 90s, President Akufo-Addo was with the people, the freedom fighters, fighting what was then called an oppressive regime. And at that time, we can forgive the excesses, not to endorse them, but we are just moved from a military regime to a democratic regime. And so the media space was not opened up. They had to fight for independent people to even have the right to set up media houses or own media houses. Then under President John Agyekum Kufuor, the criminal libel law was repealed, which further, enforced the rights of journalists in the country, decriminalized speech, and make sure that journalists can perform their functions without fear or favor. How many years down the line, and today we are back in the trenches, having to fight to redeem ourselves from the very thing that we fought to redeem ourselves from. One of the things that is festering this continuous abuse of the media has been a weak GJA. And I name the Ghana Journalists Association as a major accomplice to the brutalities against the media. Because you don't only have to perpetrate the abuse to be an accomplice. You don't only have to be part of the people to be an accomplice. The GJA over the years has become a toothless bulldog. And it watches on whilst journalists are being assaulted, brutalized, maimed in their line of duty. After that, they only serve us with some frivolous statement and they go to bed. And every now and then, these attacks keep happening. And I say, if only the GJA was stronger, these attacks will stop. Because in other jurisdictions, where you have strong journalist union or strong journalist front, you dare not attack a journalist. More or less a state machinery attacking journalist. You dare not, because they'll come after you. But can you imagine, we live in a country where a journalist has been assaulted by trying to find out or verify an information. And the first thing the president of the GJA goes on radio to say is that the journalist breached the journalistic code of ethics. Such a reckless statement from the head of the GJA. Extremely reckless. Because when a journalist is assaulted, the first thing the GJA must do is this, or ensure, is his safety. The GJA must be interested in the safety of its journalists or its members first. The GJA is not a court to make pronouncement. on actions it did not witness. And that is why when the incident happened, we had called for an independent inquiry into the matter. That is only when we would know who was wrong and who was right. But at that moment, what should be interested to the GJA president is not who was wrong and who was right, but by the safety of the journalist who was on the line of duty. So when you have a GJA president like this, people will always be emboldened to attack journalists, because in effect, what the guy was saying is that if the security agencies are convinced that they generally violated any code of ethics or any law, they are free to assault the journalist. In effect, that is what he was telling the whole world, by failing to put the interest of the journalist first. So the GJA has not been strong enough. They have not lived up to expectation. They have not lived up to their core mandate, which is to promote the interest of journalists in this country. And it's not just the GJA who has been rendered useless in this country. The Trade Union Congress, which is also the leader of the Workers' Front, has also been rendered useless. Prior to 2016, we saw a number of strikes from the Workers' Front. So many strikes, so many public and civil actions from the Workers' Front. So what is happening today? What is happening today? What are the conditions of workers in this country? So many things are going wrong, but the leaders of the Workers' Front are also failing to speak up, just like the GJA. And so if you do a trend analysis, what you realize is that all the credible institutions, voices, groups in the country that were supposed to be the voice for the groups they represent, that was supposed to be the voice of the people, that was supposed to stand up during the critical moments, have all been rendered useless. So what we have now is a democracy which is not only a partial democracy, but it's a totalitarian democracy. A democracy led by a group of totalitarians who have absolutely no space to accommodate dissenting opinions. Then we have the institution called the National Security, which, after the Ayawaso West Wogun incident, a commission of inquiry was set up to investigate the actions of this so-called national security. They came up with a recommendation that this national security, so-called national security, should be disbanded. The same way they raided the polling station at Ayawaso in gunfires and assaulted civilians. The same way they rounded up the Modern Ghana journalists and assaulted them. The same way they rounded the City FM journalists and assaulted them. It's the same way that a fortnight ago they've raided the offices of the Ashanti Regional and assault you. Look at the brutish manner in which they raided the office of City FM. Immediately this incident happened, the chairman of the National Security Council, which is the president, was on the next available flight somewhere. It tells you what his priorities are. He is not interested in the assault on the media. He is not interested in the reckless behavior of the national security who are directly under his control. He is not interested in anything. And he's out there up in arms, begging for debt forgiveness. And I find that very ridiculous, because last year, the French president, I think last year or 2 years ago, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, was here. And at a state function, you told him you don't need aid. You had launched your Ghana Beyond Aid propaganda, and since your propaganda knew no bounds, at a state function in honor of the French president, you took your propaganda there that you are building a Ghana Beyond Aid, and so you don't need any help from anybody. Today you've gone to the same Macron, up in arms, asking for debt forgiveness. This is extremely ridiculous. This is not enough reason for the president to leave the serious conditions affecting the people here, especially attacks on the media, especially by people who are directly under his control, leave them and go to these places to engage in such propaganda and needless actions that won't bring any results. Ladies and gentlemen, the media is the fourth estate of the realm, and they are called that for a reason. We have three arms of government: the executive, judiciary, and the legislature. It is the media who has a responsibility of scrutiny to look into the actions of these three arms of government, on how they appropriate the powers of state given to them. It is only through the eyes of the media that we can see whether the powers given to these people are being used to advance the cause of the people, are being used to advance the interest of the nation and the people, and what have you. We have a collective responsibility to stand up and rise against this impunity going on, this needless attack on the media. We have a collective responsibility to stand up and to ensure that the practice of media, which is now becoming dangerous in the country, whatever we need to do to ensure that that thing becomes a thing of the past, we need to. Because the people perpetrating this action against the media no nose bounce. They started from mere civilians,